Thanks, everybody. So as we all know, there's a lot of hype around generative AI and LLMs. There's a lot of skepticism and anti-hype as well. Now, I've been playing with these for a while now, and I've seen them, continue to iteratively improve. And I think they've gotten to a point where they can be really helpful for creating things, for helping you learn things, and for making your work more fun by taking some of the tedium out of it. So I want to show something today that we've just, it just came into existence like less than a month ago. So it's really new, but it's been a lot of fun. And let me just show you what it is. So it's an assistant for working with Shiny. And we're calling it Shiny Assistant for now, because for lack of a better name. Hopefully, maybe we'll come up with something better in the future. So this is what it looks like. It's a chat interface. This is built again with this chat component that we have currently in Shiny for Python, but it's coming to Shiny for R. And there's all this text here, which I will not bore you by reading, but instead I'll just show you what it can do. So here's one thing you can do. You can ask it a question. In this case, we're going to say, how do I modify my app so that a plot updates only when a button is clicked? Pretty common question. It's going to think. It will answer. This is Shiny for R. It's going to talk about action buttons and event reactive. I won't go into detail about all that stuff, but it will show you an example application here, which you can, if you spent the time reading this, you could learn something from this and maybe try out this app. So that's one kind of question you can ask it. Another kind of question is this. So create an app that demonstrates a linear regression. So it's going to think, it's going to write out some stuff, pausing it here. It's going to generate some app code. And then you'll notice on the right, if you've used shinylive before, if you've seen this, this is the shinylive interface. So it generates the code, it loads the code into shinylive, and then it runs that app. Okay, now we can interact with this a little bit to make sure it's working. Click that button to generate new data, and it's generated some random data, well, semi-random data, and it's done a linear regression on it. All right, now after you do this, you can twiddle around with these, you can twiddle these controls a little bit. There we go. Just to make sure that it works. And there it goes, it's updating the data and the linear regression for it. Okay, so this is the first step, but you might be looking at this and you're like, well, this data doesn't look very realistic. It fits the line a little bit too well. It's too evenly distributed. And if you have opinions on this, you can go and ask the Shiny Assistant to make some changes. So here we'll say, increase the noise by 4 times, make the data more normally distributed along X, and increase the number of points by 2 times. So it's going to go and generate some code, update that code. And here's the app. You might actually have noticed that these numbers are larger than what you'd expect by those multiplication factors. That's because I cut out some more iterative steps here in the video, so don't be too surprised by that. And if we click on Generate New Data, now we have this app with updated data that looks a little bit more realistic. And we can keep going. So let's ask it to do more stuff. Add residual lines to the plot. Add a slider to control the slope of the data. And it will update the code, load that in the editor, and it'll run the app. But this time, if we click on the button, there's an error that pops up. So the Shiny Assistant is not perfect. It doesn't do everything perfectly. And so sometimes you have to deal with errors like this. Now, in this particular case, the error is that it couldn't find the pipe. That's the Magrider pipe. And so, I happen to know how to fix this. We can use the base R pipe. That was added in R 4.1. So we'll just replace that Magrider pipe with the base R pipe. Rerun it. This is shinylive, so we can just click that button and it'll reload the app. And they click Generate New Data. And still, the plot didn't come up. And if we look down below, we'll see that there is another error. So I could go and fix this. I know what I know what the solution is here. It says error and mutate could not find function mutate. You probably do too. But if it's an error that you're not familiar with, I'll show you what you can do. You can select the text and just ask the Shiny Assistant, like, hey, I got this error. What could be causing it? And it might just answer your question, or in this particular case, it decided to, update the app and fix the problem, which is that it needed to load dplyr. All right, now when we click it, generate new data, we have the residual lines, and the bug is gone there. Okay, now one other thing that you can ask it, that I'm going to ask it to do here, which is to make the summary look a little bit nicer. This is just the raw output from if you call summary of a LM object. And let's make it look a little bit nicer. So for the summary, instead of displaying plain text output, display the important information in a nicely formatted card. I'm going to go and update the code. And then when it's all done, that card there looks a lot nicer than just that raw text output. Okay, so this is, like I could have done any of these things individually, but it would have taken a lot longer, right? This is all sort of bread and butter R programming stuff, doing a linear model, writing a shiny app with sliders, and so on. Okay, and then after you make something interesting with this, because it's shinylive, you can just click on the share button, and then you get these links that, these URLs that you can copy and paste, and then somebody else can see the app. And if you weren't already aware of this, the whole entire app is encoded in this URL, which is much longer than what you can see here, but that's the whole app. Now, if you look at the Shiny Assistant interface here, there's really two important parts. There's the assistant, which is the chatbot, and then there's shinylive. And these two things working together, that together to make the whole Shiny Assistant. For the Shiny Assistant part, it's really useful to think of it really as an assistant. So you can ask it to do anything, and it'll try to do it, but it won't be able to successfully do everything. You can think of it as a helper that knows a lot, and it works very quickly and tirelessly, but it makes mistakes, and it has a limited understanding of complex projects. It can get you started on a project really quickly. So even if it doesn't give you a finished product, it can give you a scaffold on which to build. And it can answer questions about your app. If you've got questions about how to do something in Shiny, or like, why is this code written this way? It can answer those questions. But you still need domain knowledge of the problem. You still need to verify and test the code, and you still need to get involved with debugging. So it's here to help you, but not replace you. The other component is shinylive. And I'm just going to go over this real quickly. So it's Shiny for R, Python compiled to WebAssembly, running in the browser. So the traditional model for Shiny app deployment is you have R or Python running on a server, and then the client computers connect to the server, but most of the code is running on the server there. With a shinylive deployment, the server is dumb and it just sends out some files, and then you have R or Python running in the browser. So that has some implications for security. So when R and Python is running in the browser, it's in the browser security sandbox, which is very safe. It's been battle tested on literally billions of devices over the years. It can't access local files on your computer and has restricted network connectivity. So it makes it pretty safe to run all the code that the LLM generates. You can't run all packages because not all packages can compile to WebAssembly, but more and more are coming all the time. And there's no secrets from the user. So with shinylive, any code that you have in the data is sent to the user's computer, so they can look at that. So you don't have any secrets from them. And finally, the advantage is that sharing the shinylive applications is really easy. Now, the example that we had before was with R. Shiny Assistant can also write Shiny for Python apps. So there's a little switch in the upper left. I don't know if you noticed that. You can just switch it over there and it'll do Python. Okay, so for the next example that I want to show, we're going to use Shiny for Python. And instead of being this sort of like self-contained application with the synthetic data, we can actually make an app that talks to the world. So let's see. Cool. That's interesting. That's not on my screen, but it is down there. Okay, that's fine. So this is a website that I learned about last week. It's called embedding.io. I don't really know much about it, but it sounded interesting. You can turn any website into a knowledge base for LLM. So it'll take the text from a website and break it up into chunks and put those text chunks in a vector database. And each chunk will have a vector associated with it which somehow captures like the semantic content of that piece of text. And the purpose of this is that you can like ask a question, and that will have a vector encoding as well. And you can pick out chunks of text that are semantically related to that question. All right, so I thought, okay, this sounds interesting. I'd like to play with it. And on their API documentation, they have this example here. This is how you use it. So it's a curl request, and this is for the writings of I think this is for Paul Graham's blog, and Paul Graham is the founder of Y Combinator. This is how you interact with it, which is, you know, like I could interact with it this way, but that's kind of awkward and not and a little bit not very fun to play with. So I thought I'd ask the Shiny assistant to build an app to do this. Okay, so here's what I'd said. Create an app which queries a web API and prints the result. The curl command is that. I just copied and pasted that. Okay, get the query as an input from the user. So it goes, writes some code, and this is the app that it comes up with. And it pre-populated this that input with the question that was already there, which is fine. I'll just go with that for now. And when we click the submit button, this is what comes back. This is a JSON array of objects. This is one object, that's one entry. There's another one down here, and there's a whole bunch of these. So that's a nicer way of interacting with it than, you know, via curl and the command line. So I could ask it other questions, and it'll get different results for them. But what if I want to display this in a way that's nicer looking, right? Rather than just like raw JSON. Well, one thing you might want to display is the URL and the title of the blog post and the content there. So here's one thing you can do with it. You can select that text and tell Shiny Assistant this. The response is JSON array with objects that look like this. Paste that in there. Okay, display each of these items as a card with the URL, title, and content. Now it's going to go and generate some more code. Run the app, and then when we click the button, the results are displayed there. So, and with each entry on its own card. And it even decided to link to the blog post, which is pretty cool. I didn't ask it to do that, but I thought that was a good idea. All right, so now with these vector databases, one of the reasons they're so popular these days is because they all are used for it's called RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation. So what it is you ask it a question, and you get all these chunks of text. And then you send those chunks of text to an LLM. And you tell the LLM, hey, here's all this information. You know, now given that information, please answer my question. So I thought, well, can I do that with this, with Shiny Assistant? And in order to do that, we need an LLM. So I decided to use OpenAI. The OpenAI, if you look at the OpenAI API documentation, it has this here. This is some Python code. And the interface is really nice, but unfortunately, this does not work in shinylive because some dependencies of the OpenAI package are not available for Python. That's Python and WebAssembly. So I decided, okay, I'm not going to use this. Even though Shiny Assistant could write this code, it won't run in the shinylive interface. Instead, they also have API documentation for using curl, and this is just like basically the raw HTTP request. So I decided to copy and paste this, and pay attention here. There's also this thing here. It needs an API key from OpenAI. All right. So you can take that and ask it, assemble all the contents that we had before into a single string. Use that string as part of a prompt to an LLM, and the user query has a question to ask about the information. Okay. The curl command for the LLM is paste that in there. And then we'll also tell it to get the API key as a password input from the user. So I don't want to send my API key to Claude here, which is what's being used as the backend. So I want to just get that as input from the user. So it goes and generates the code. I have to paste in my API key there, and then I submit. And then this is what it comes up with. So it has the AI response. This is the response from OpenAI. But it also includes all these other text chunks here, which is not really what I want. So with the AI response, there's a few other things that are kind of not right about it. Like it's truncating it. The response is in Markdown, but it's only rendering it as raw text. So I can ask Shiny Assistant to do it a little bit differently. So only display the AI response, don't truncate it, and render it as Markdown. So it's going to go and update the code. And again, I'll have to paste in the API key. And when I submit it, this is the summary that comes from OpenAI. So we just made a reg app, and that was like in 5 minutes, which is pretty good. All right. So there's some things to know about Shiny Assistant. These are important details. So it uses Claude 3.5 Sonnet from Anthropic, which is it's a really good model for code generation. It makes mistakes, and you're going to have to deal with those mistakes, or you're going to have to ask it to deal with them. The training data is a little bit behind the times. So for Python, it's not very good with the Shiny Express syntax because that's relatively new. There's not as much training data for it. So it's better at Shiny for R than it is at Shiny for Python. And again, that probably has to do with there being more training data for Shiny for R. In shinylive, Python is better for doing web requests, so for like talking to these web APIs. In R, it's more difficult to do. There's some workarounds, but I asked George Stegg, and he told me that our support for web requests is coming in WebR. Okay, and the code in the editor panel is sent to the LLM, so don't put any secrets in there. Don't put any confidential data like API keys in the chat or in the code. If you need to use confidential data, ask the LLM to add a password input like the one that I had in that last example. Okay, and I just want to show a real quick, some screenshots of some apps that I've made in the last couple of weeks with, along with some other people. I don't have time to describe all of them, but these apps, I think they all took like 20 minutes or less. Some of them took like 5 minutes, some of them took like 20 minutes. And they might not be fully polished products, but they are, it's really satisfying to have an idea and turn it into something that's concrete and tangible in that amount of time. And then you can spend your time refining it afterwards. So I find that to be a lot of fun. Okay, so a few things here. This is the URL for it, Shiny Apps, gallery.shinyapps.io/assistant. If you go there, actually, you know what? I'm sorry. I think that might not be enabled right now. I'll do it right after this talk. It'll direct you to a form that you can fill out, and then you'll be put on a waiting list. And then we'll try to get people off that waiting list pretty quickly. We also have a Shiny contest, which there's like these cards for it all over these seats. And you can use a Shiny Assistant to do the Shiny contest. All right, so some last few details here. Shiny Assistant is very new and experimental. We might log the chat sessions for research and model training in the future, to keep that in mind. We're paying for the LLM usage, so you don't have to. But if you want to, you can bring your own Anthropic API key. So, and finally, go forth, make some cool stuff, and share it, and have fun with this. Thanks.
Yeah. One quick question as person setting up. It seems like the answer may be no right now, but like, have you given thought about like internal use of like your all now, like local LLM machine?
Yes. Yeah, actually, Llama 3.1 is pretty good. But at least in my experience, it's not good enough to be that helpful yet. But I'm sure, the time is coming soon.
Can you plug like a local
one? Yeah, we need to add an abstraction layer, but I think Joe has a prototype of that. So we can do that pretty quickly.
Great. Thank you so much.